If you've been saying, I will give myself 6 months to really change my body, and you're planning to just pick a workout plan, cut some calories, and hope that it sticks, I want to be honest with you. That approach has about a 6-week shelf life. Today, I'm walking you through a 26-week plan, that's 6 months, to build muscle and lose fat after 40, broken into 3 phases that build on each other. You'll learn why the first 7 weeks should involve almost no changes to your diet, what actually happens when you start eating more instead of less, and the specific skill that determines whether your results last or just evaporate the moment you stop following a plan. Welcome to Wits and Weights, the show that puts a popular piece of fitness advice under the microscope, finds the hidden reason it doesn't work, and gives you the deceptively simple fix that does. I'm your host, Philip Pape, and this episode is coming out just a few days before the start of spring. A lot of you are thinking about the next 6 months. Maybe you want to look different by fall. Maybe you want to feel strong and lean and confident at the beach this summer. Maybe you have a wedding to go to, or maybe you just want to feel better in your own clothes. And if you're over 40 and you've been lifting for a while, but your body doesn't quite reflect all that work that you've been putting in, I think this episode is a good roadmap to plan out the next 6 months. So I'm going to walk you through a complete 26-week plan. 26 weeks is exactly half a year from start to finish. I'm not going to give you a list of exercises. I'm not going to help you calculate macros. I'm talking about the process, the phases that build the right skills in the right order, so that by the end of the 6 months, you know how to manage your own body composition without needing someone to tell you what to do. Because you guys, you probably like this podcast, or maybe you just found it and you can binge all the information you want. But the real goal here is to actually make the change, to take the action to make the change. And then stick around to the very end, because after the main episode wraps up, I'm going to share a 60-second protein audit that you can do tonight at dinner. It's the single fastest way to find out if protein distribution is the bottleneck holding back your results. So today you're going to learn why the very first phase, where you change almost nothing, I know it sounds counterintuitive, is the most important phase of any transformation. Then you're going to get a specific week-by-week structure for all 26 weeks across the phases. And I'll show you one diagnostic skill that separates people who maintain their results, right? The 5% of people who maintain their results from the 95% of people who just bounce back and do it all over again. All right. So first of all, why we have to understand why things don't work for a lot of people. What does a typical 6-month transformation look like for most people, especially over 40? And just doesn't work. And I'm going to tell you, because I've coached hundreds of clients through this situation, and I see what has happened and burned them in the past, and I don't want that to happen to you. It usually starts with what? Motivation. The new year, right? New Year's resolution. Or maybe it's a birthday, or maybe a photo that you see of yourself and you're like, ugh, I gotta change. Like, this is the time, right? Or maybe you finally raided that candy drawer one last time, raising my hand here, and like, I've got to change things. And then your plan looks something like this. I'm going to find a workout program. I'm going to get some sort of calorie tracker or app. I'm going to go ahead and, cut some calories, set a deficit, or maybe I'm going to eat a certain diet, right? Maybe I'm going to go cut carbs or go keto or something like that. And I'm going to get more steps. I'm going to work out, 3, 4, 5 days a week. And then I'm going to just push through. I'm going to push through as long as I can. And that's how I used to do things. I mean, leading up to my wedding way back in 2006, I did this weird diet with a restricted list of foods, and I was starving all the time. It felt miserable, but I had this date, I had this wedding. And so it was very, very extrinsically motivating, and I pushed through it, but it was miserable. And of course, what happened? I gained everything back afterward, starting with the honeymoon. So when this happens, right, the first week is great. You're fired up. Maybe you're meal prepping. You go to the grocery store and get some new healthy foods. Maybe you're hitting the gym, all 3 or 4 days that week. You go in regularly, you're good. Maybe week 2, you're still solid, and, you're getting this going like, yeah, I've got this. Week 3, you miss a day, schedule gets in the way. You feel guilty about it. Maybe you have somebody invites you out to dinner, or you just, you have some alcohol, whatever, and things start to fall off. Week 4, you're looking at the scale and it hasn't moved like you expected, or then it moved, but it bounced back up, and now you're confused. You're like, no, maybe this isn't working. By week 6, you're done with your willpower. The willpower is gone. And now you start making all of those little exceptions where, okay, I'm not going to track today because of this, or I'm going to go, my workout's going to be shorter today, or I need to skip my workout today, but I'll make it up for tomorrow. you know what I'm talking about. It's these little excuses we make to ourselves that just start to build up like 1,000 little cuts. And then by month 3, what happens? You're back where you started, except now you're also frustrated and a little more convinced that your body doesn't respond the way it used to and that you can't do this. Does that sound familiar? I hope I'm hitting you really hard where you recognize this pattern in yourself, because I see it a lot and I used to be this. Okay, I used to be this. It's not you. It's not by you. I mean, it's not discipline, working harder, doing more, all of that, right? You didn't fail because you're lazy. It's not because you lack motivation. It's because of the approach, and it actually is skipping the most important part of any transformation. I want you to think of it like building a house. Okay, analogies are really helpful here. All right. Most plans for transformation, and I know this because people come to me having worked with a coach, got in a result, and then they go right back to where they were before. So even working with a coach or with a structured program isn't always enough, right? It's got to be long lasting after that. Most transformation plans, it's like if you were building a house, it's like they gave you the cans of paint and they gave you the furniture, right? And that's like the calorie deficit and the workout plan. But there's actually no foundation. Like you literally are put in a plot of land on some dirt and you have a can of paint and a couch. Okay. And here we go. Right. And you never understand, how much you're actually eating or why you're eating it or how your body is responding to your food and your training and what your stress and sleep look like or what your actual metabolic expenditure is. I can't tell you how many programs people never really learned their metabolism. I don't understand that. If you go through 6 months with a coach, how did you never really know your metabolism? I don't understand it. And you could say, well, because I'm not calorie counting. Well, yeah, but if you don't have any understanding at all, how can you make any adjustments that make sense with any level of precision, right? And then every decision you make is based on guesses. Half the people I've worked with come into me thinking that they are overeating. And it's understandable why, right? Because we gain weight over many years of a certain lifestyle, and we think it's simply because of overconsumption. Or people like to simplify it. Hey, it's just calorie balance, just calories in, calories out. That's the obesity problem. But a lot of people are actually under eating and not necessarily calories per se, but it is calories for a lot of people, but it's also protein, right? Nearly 50% of people cite protein as their number one struggle, not because they don't know it matters. They hear it all the time, like too much on podcasts, but because they haven't figured out how to hit it across full day of meals. And that's a very simple problem solution set. But yet, if you haven't solved that problem, it's going to cascade into all the other problems that you also haven't solved. About half of people say they have problems with their hormones, especially postmenopausal women, a huge demographic that we speak to on this podcast, especially now that I see how impactful it is and how frustrating it is. It affects your nutrition and training. So if you don't account for those variables, then you're just fighting everything from day one. So I think the hidden flaw in the advice to you just need to be in a calorie deficit and you just need to train the right way isn't the deficit or the training. It is the sequence of how you put those skills in place so that they work for you and not executing before you understand the system you're trying to change, not taking action on a lack of a plan, if that makes sense. So I think the fix is a phased approach. We've talked about periodization in the past. We've talked about phases and structure. We're going to go over that today. And I'm going to split it into 3 phases over 26 weeks with a very specific progression. And I've given them names. They're called Stop Guessing, Eat More, Lift Heavy, and Trust Yourself. Okay, Stop Guessing, Eat More, Lift Heavy, which, yes, is also the name of our program that walks you through all of this, and Trust Yourself. So I'm going to walk through each one. And by the way, if you do want to go check out that program, which opens on March 30th, just go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. That's eatmoreliftheavy.com, and you can learn all about it there. We've got lots of cool information available for you to check out. But let's walk you through this today. All right, phase 1 is stop guessing. This is the first 7 weeks. This is the phase that feels the most counterintuitive because the goal is not to change your body. The goal is to understand your body. All right. And I know you want to start losing fat immediately, or many of you use the term lose weight, which if you're new to the podcast, we differentiate between weight loss and fat loss. Fat loss is really what you want. You want to lose fat and hold on to muscle. You don't want to just lose muscle and fat. Everybody wants to lose fat. Most people come into the program, even if they want to build muscle, they also want to lose fat. But if you start a calorie deficit in week 1 before you actually know what your calorie needs are, then you're guessing. And guessing is probably why the last plan didn't work. even if you were working with a coach who you were dependent on to tell you what to do, but you were still guessing as to your own data of what to do. So here's what the first 7 weeks look like. Week 1 is where you start setting things up just for tracking. You start tracking your food and weight every day. Now, I would recommend using MacroFactor. MacroFactor is the only app in the market still, I'm surprised about this, but it's the only app that calculates your metabolism, your daily expenditure based on your food and weight. All the other apps, MacroFactor, MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, Lose It, they're trackers, but they don't calculate with an algorithm your metabolic needs to give you the right targets. So then you're not actually trying to hit the right targets. You're using a calculator, and that's not good enough. That can be off by hundreds of calories. So start tracking your food and weight every day, and ideally use a tool like MacroFactor. Use my code Wits and Weights, all one word, to get a 2-week free trial. You don't have to. That would support the podcast. You don't have to, but it's Wits and Weights, all one word. Download MacroFactor from your app store. And what that'll let you do when you just start logging, don't worry about the target yet. Just start logging. You're going to see what's happening. What are you eating? How much are you eating? How much protein? How does your weight fluctuate day to day? Oh, wow. It goes up and down, 3 pounds some days. You're building a measurement system, and that system needs about 6 weeks of consistent data before you can get an accurate picture of your true calorie expenditure. And some people will say, well, it's only 2 to 3 weeks, but really, at least a month to 6 weeks before it's really dialed in. And then you also need training programs. So to me, it's the food and weight side and then the training side are the two big buckets. All right. So the tracking food that we just talked about, that's just tracking. That should take you 3 to 5 minutes a day. You're not changing anything. You're just tracking 3 to 5 minutes a day. That's it. Super, super easy. For training, you got to be careful here, right? There are a ton of things online. There's a lot of free programs online. There's apps that have free programs, and that's cool, but you can't just pick a random program. You have to have one that's matched, first of all, to, what will work for you to actually show up and do it regularly. So that's how many days a week you can realistically train. If you want to train 4, but really you're only going to get in 3 on most weeks, go for 3. Your equipment. So do you have a well-equipped home gym or not? Most people don't, although that's a great aspirational goal. But if you don't, you're probably going to go to a commercial gym in the area that's within a short driving distance so that you make sure you get to it. But it has to have enough equipment to get the job done. There's also your experience level, and there's, of course, your goal. A lot of people over 40 especially are running programs that are not designed for them for one reason or another, having to do with their joint health or the movement patterns or the strength levels or whatever, or even the equipment. So if you are, a woman who's training 3 days a week and you have a barbell and a rack, your program is going to look different from someone training 5 days a week with a full commercial gym setup, for example, right? All right, so that sounds like a lot for week 1, but really all it is you're starting tracking food and weight, and you're identifying how you're going to train, getting a training program, okay? Week 2 is now you're going to take baseline measurements. So you don't even do that in week 1. Just get things set up. Week 2, you're going to take measurements like you could take photos, you could take some circumference measurements. You can start tracking biofeedback, things like sleep, energy, stress recovery. We have a very simple tracker in Eat More, Lift Heavy that does this all in one place once a week. Again, it takes you 5 minutes. So it takes you 5 minutes on a Sunday, you're done. And this data is going to become incredibly valuable in phase 2 when we start making decisions, but only if you have a baseline to compare against. Wouldn't it be great to see your trend for your sleep and your stress and your mood and your energy and your recovery and your hunger, and then know where the dials are, where the bottlenecks are? That is really, really powerful. We're able to coach people tremendously well when we have that kind of data. All right, then week 3 is where things get interesting, and it's one of the most important weeks because this is where we tackle some of those initial fears that I know are in a lot of your heads, especially the fear of eating more, okay? If you're, for example, a woman over 40 who's been dieting on and off for years, maybe decades, this is genuinely a scary thought. Eating more food, right? Because you've been told your whole life that less food equals less body fat, or you need to eat less, move more to lose weight. And I think that false belief is the single biggest barrier to changing your body composition right now. It's the single biggest fear I've seen. So in this week, you're going to understand why people are not helped by this undereating. And it's a metabolic argument about chronic restriction having to do with a lower expenditure and metabolism over time. And there's a psychological case as well related to diet trauma, to food fear, the belief that eating more is going to make you fat, and really what eating more looks like in practice. It's not cheat meals. It's not free for all. It's not just eating uninhibited. It's actually strategic. It's protein first. It's food volume and fiber first. It's nutrition, quality and quantity coming together, combined with the enjoyment of food as well. And we want to address this before making changes to your nutrition, because if you skip that mindset piece, everything is going to feel like a resistant, like friction as you try to change your nutrition habits. And then the next few weeks of the first 7 weeks, this is where you start to introduce some of the specifics. Nutritional foundations and meal timing, for example. Protein is super, super important. How much protein you need per day, how much protein you should get per meal. Per day, we're going to talk about the evidence-based target of 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. And per meal, it's really more of a practical thing. And relative to when you're training and pre and post workout nutrition and just general distribution per your schedule. And then in the next few weeks, as you're setting all this up and establishing your baseline, you want to look at things like how many steps you're getting, what kind of movement you're doing outside the gym, your sleep, your stress, and then as you go along, how to read this biofeedback data that you've been collecting, right? So this is by weeks 5 and 6, I would say, you're starting to collect and learn about this data. And it's really not a lot that you're changing each week. You're just slowly putting the pieces together. And then now, look, if I work with a one-on-one client, we're fast tracking this process a little bit. But if you're doing this on your own, or if you're doing this as part of our Eat More Lift Heavy program, where we want you we want the habits to stick and to teach you the skill, then you want to be methodical about it and do it the right way. And then week 7, now you get to the culminating milestone of your first big week. And this is, you're going to assess how your training's been going. You're going to look at the data of your biofeedback, your recovery, your food, and your expenditure, and put it all together and say, what's been going on without me trying to change things? Without me trying to change things, what is my body doing? What are its tendencies? Okay. What is it telling me? What are the signals it's telling me? And then you're ready to go into phase 2 and set some targets based on actual data. That's what's happening. And that's why we call this first phase stop guessing, because now you're ready to stop guessing. It makes sense. So I know 7 weeks sounds like a long time to just set things up, but you can tell there's actually a lot of little pieces in here. And every client I've coached who goes through this tells me the same thing. Like, I wish I had done that in the past. As frustrating as it first seemed, because it seemed like I wasn't doing anything, it was actually the most powerful thing I've ever done, because for the first time, I understand my body and I know what to do now. I've got confidence. Boom. Huge. Now, everything I just described, this phased approach, the week by week structure, building this foundation before making changes, that is exactly what Eat More Lift Heavy is designed to do. I am really proud of this. This is a new 26-week coaching program that launches March 30th in just a few days. You get a phased program, an experience I like to call it, with one focus per week. You get a training program matched to your situation from week 1. There are monthly live coaching calls with me and Coach Carol, and there's a community where you get questions answered. And so it's a really powerful way to combine your training and nutrition needs and how to build those skills. It combines both. Eat More Lift Heavy gives you both coached together because they are not separate things. It's very hard to take a training thing over here and a nutrition over here and smush them together. These work together with a defined endpoint of 26 weeks where you have the skills now to manage your own physique. That is the goal. And if you're a woman over 40 who lifts and is tracking, but you're not seeing results, this is going to help you get those results finally and have the skills to keep them. So you don't go afterward and say, oh, I worked with Philip and now I've gained all the weight back. That's not going to happen. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. That's eatmoreliftheavy.com. We have what's called founders pricing. If you're listening to this podcast, available through March 29th, and it locks in permanently as long as you stay enrolled. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. All right, let's get to phase 2. Phase 2 is where the real work happens, I'll call it. Eat More, Lift Heavy. This is weeks roughly 8 through 18. So that's 11 weeks. And by real work, I don't mean suffering or being miserable. I mean, this is where you make decisions with your data and you learn to read the signals your body is sending you. So by the beginning of this week, your data is somewhat dialed in and somewhat consistent. And I say somewhat because it'll never be perfect, and that's fine. So for example, if you're using MacroFactor, your expenditure should be very well known at this point because it's been learning your metabolism for 7 weeks. And now you could know, is it going up, down, is it stable? And how many calories can I work from for a fat loss phase, right? So if you're in a fat loss phase and your expenditure is relatively stable or it's starting to decline slowly, we would expect that, right? We would expect a little bit of metabolic adaptation, but you need to start from the right baseline to begin with. And then you can decide later on, do I need a diet break, this and that, all the decisions you have to make. So you're no longer flying blind because you have the starting data. And then as you move into the next few weeks of this phase, there's some different things that unlock. All right. So if we were to tie it to the way we designed our program, if you're doing this on your own, let's say, week 9 is going to tackle things like weekend and social eating, because that is what trips up roughly 40% of people. So what we do in this program is we start from the biggest hitter problems and we work our way down the list and unlock them for you so you can deal with all the issues life throws at you. So things like alcohol, eating on the weekends, going out. And the fix here is simpler than most people expect, and it has to do with structure and planning. You don't want to make decisions when your willpower is low. You want to make them when it's high. Well, when's the willpower low? Well, when you go to eat at that restaurant, you're all excited. The passions are high. The emotions are high. The hunger is high. You're going to make the worst decisions at that point. So the act of planning actually changes the outcome because it shifts you from reactive to intentional to when you have the most willpower, which is earlier in the week. All right. Now, in our program, we also talk about alcohol and the research about its effects on fat loss and recovery and things like that. It's a separate little piece that's important. But, the step 1 here is to plan ahead for whatever you're doing. This is a very important thing. All right. Then you get to week 10, and now you have 8 weeks of training data, 8+ weeks of training data. This is usually a good time to diagnose your training. Are your lifts stalling? Do you have recovery issues? How does the volume look? How does the intensity look? Is the program right for you? This is a great time to decide, do you need to switch your training switch the whole training program or just make adjustments, right? And then we're going to tick through the next few weeks pretty quickly. So week 11, we're going to go deeper into protein, because most people at this point, they've now truly understood what they're able to hit and what they're not able to hit. And now you can build a fix for all the meals that fall short and get you to where you need to be consistently. Weeks 12 through 16 are really about biofeedback pattern analysis, adjusting your program, continuing to adjust your program, planning for phase transitions. So like, what are you going to do when your fat loss phase is done in a moment, in a few weeks? How are you going to come out of that? How are you going to deal with plateaus? What about supplements, right? So notice that we didn't try to solve all this in week 1. What I'm saying here is that as you go, each of these things unlock in the right priority. Like supplements, I don't even like to deal with them until you're maybe 10 or 12 weeks in, because by then you'll understand where some of the deficiencies might be. You might even have some lab work. You might find that, energy is a problem, but you've solved everything else. So now it could come down to like a nutrient deficiency. Maybe you're low in magnesium or something like that, and so on, right? So you've got all of this data pretty mature by now. You've got things like photo before and afters to see and motivate you as you go. You see the change in your trend weight probably having moved significantly at this point, or, at least meaningfully. You've also collected physique data to tell you whether you're building muscle and losing fat and body recomping, right? So weeks 12 through 16 are the sweet spot for that. And within that is, I mentioned, a point where you need to know, should I change phases? What do I do when I change phases? Should I keep cutting? Should I switch to maintenance? Should I start a recovery diet? Should I take a diet break? Should I switch how I distribute my calories? Again, notice these are advanced things that come later on once you see how things are moving for you. You don't do these from step 1. And so this decision-making framework is methodical, and it's based on your signals and your signs and your biofeedback. And if all this sounds very complicated and confusing, it's because we've thought about it over years with hundreds of clients and have broken it down to something that's actually doable and actionable. Okay. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com if you want to jump on the program to help you do that. This podcast episode is really just to lay it all out for you and let you decide, okay, is this something I want to try on my own? And then I could deep dive into Philip's podcast and do it, or do I want to get some help doing it? All right. And then we get to the final couple weeks of this phase where we go a little bit deeper on training. Okay. We look at deloads. We look at block periodization. We look at evaluating whether your program still fits your goals. We want to make you really autonomous when it comes to strength training, so you're not like tied or dependent on, say, a personal trainer or a coach. And then finally get to your milestone for phase 2, where you do a full review, you update your targets again, clear set of goals for the next and final phase. So let's do that. Phase 3, the final phase, is called Trust Yourself. This is weeks 19 through 26. And this also, I think, is very different from almost any other program, because the goal here in these final 8 weeks is independence and sustaining your results. By the end of this phase, you should be making most decisions about your nutrition and training on your own, with decreasing reliance or dependence on a coach or program. And all the coaches listening to this are like, Philip, what are you doing to us? We want to keep clients locked on forever. Well, that's not the way I work. I actually want you to feel so independent and powerful that you can go coach this stuff yourself. But you know what usually happens is you then, if you have a more advanced goal, I'm here to help you do that as well if you'd like, right? That's an authentic, I'll say, trust-based way to coach, in my opinion. So think about what you've built at this point. You've got 5 months of body weight data, biofeedback trends, training cycles with progression on your lifts. You know what your PRs are. You've probably gone through one phase transition at least. Well, definitely you went from the first phase to the second phase, probably for maintenance of fat loss, for example. You know your expenditure, you know how your expenditure changes, you know your protein gaps. You've practiced eating around social situations and weekends. So many skills. You're super proud of yourself at this point. So now what do we want to do? Well, now we want to step it up one more level to the final bottlenecks and points of friction that people face. So for example, week 19, we look at travel and disruption strategies, right? What happens when life gets in the way and you have vacation, business travel? How do you keep a minimum effective dose? How do you maintain protein without getting too obsessive at like restaurants and eating out? How do you get back on track when a trip throws you off, right? By the way, the answer to that one is you just start again. Like, I'll just give you that answer. It's you start again. But a lot of this has to do with planning ahead for those types of situations. Week 20 is one of my favorite weeks. We call it in our program, Teaching Yourself. It's an exercise. And what you do is you write out your current approach, your system, your fitness, your training, all that, as if you were explaining it to a friend. Have you ever done that before? If you've never done that before, it's powerful. You're writing down your system, how you eat, how you train, how you make decisions, kind of like into a little manual for yourself. And this exercise is going to reveal gaps, because anything you can't articulate, especially if you can't explain why you do it, you don't quite understand or own it yet. There's still some mystery that we need to unlock so you truly, truly understand it. So I really love this one. And you can do that exercise for yourself as well. The next week, we're getting up to week 21, we start to talk more about hormones. You're like, why didn't we start talking about hormones at the beginning? Well, in our program, we will deal with hormones early if they are relevant to you individually. But in general, this is one of those more advanced things where I say, look, get the basics in place, do it for these, 2 to 4 months, right? Get through this second phase, and then see what's left and see what you have to deal with from a hormone perspective. If you're in peri or postmenopause, now you've got 5 months of data showing how your cycle and hormonal shifts are affecting things independent of the lifestyle changes, because you've already made those. So now, how exactly are hormones affecting your weight, your energy, your recovery, etc.? And now you can see the patterns and make those tactical adjustments. And that might be, seeking out hormone therapy or some other form of treatment or, therapy that you might need, or supplementation. All right, then we get to weeks 22 and 23, and this is where we talk about maintaining your maintenance and using long-term periodization. So these are skills that really coaches learn, people into nutrition science like myself learned, and a lot of, I'll say, people doing this for themselves don't think too much about this stuff, I'll be honest, but they're very important skills. Most people are jumping from one program to the next, but what's important is how do you transition between phases, not programs, but between phases without regaining all the weight or without losing what you've lost? How do you map out the next 6 to 12 months of your training and nutrition when it might look different than the last 6 to 12 months? You're not just going to keep doing the same thing, even though the underlying skills are the same. When do you cut versus build versus maintain? What triggers those changes? So I think at this point in your journey, you are thinking about these things and maybe stepping it up to that level of awareness and knowledge. And we teach people to do that for themselves. We're getting to the end here. Okay. Week 24 is learning to troubleshoot things without a coach as well. So we actually give you scenarios and you work through them. You practice scenarios like, okay, what if your weight jumped 3 pounds overnight after a restaurant meal? What do you do? Like, tell us why that happened and what do you do? Your energy tank this week, what do you check? You've been in a deficit for 12 weeks and progress all of a sudden stalled. What are your options? Right? And these are the diagnostic questions I would ask to get to an answer to help someone on a coaching call, but we actually have exercises to help you do that for yourself. And then week 25, you're going to take your measurements. You're going to compare everything to your starting point. You're going to write a story about your own transformation. So this is, how did your identity reveal itself to what it is today? What changed? What did you learn? What surprised you? Actually writing it down. So again, these are all things you could do on your own, guys. I'm explaining our program, but also telling you the roadmap so that any of these things that resonate, like, oh my gosh, I've never actually written down my story of success to learn something from it and then also motivate myself. And then finally, the final week is you're going to choose what's next. You can choose, am I going to, implement more of this phase? I'm going to go to a new phase. Do I need to step it up to a new goal? Do I want to compete? All those kinds of things. Like, there is really no endpoint. There's just a next level, and a next level after that. All right, before I share details on how to get started with this plan, I do want to remind you, stick around because I've got a 60-second protein audit that I promised you. But if you want to follow this exact 26-week roadmap today with the exact instructions and exercise and guidance, as well as automated tools, and of course, human coaching, that is what Eat More, Lift Heavy is for. So you'll have 2 coaches, you'll have a 26-week phased experience. Each week unlocks, I'll say, teachable moments, but also specific actions to take that are achievable week by week. You're going to get a training program assigned from day one, monthly live coaching calls, and the community that can help you with that accountability. It's not a Facebook, it's not a social media thing. It is a let's get the work done thing. The program starts March 30th. Founder pricing is still available right now through March 29th. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. And if you lock it in, you're going to have that price forever. It's quite a big discount from the public price. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. That's eatmoreliftheavy.com. We also have spots available in the dialed in tier, which is a little bit higher tier that includes personal coaching from me and Coach Carol, a private Telegram chat, form checks, weekly and monthly reviews of your data. So it's asynchronous, very personalized coaching in that tier, but we have limited spots. Go to eatmoreliftheavy.com. If you see the option to select dialed in, that means we have some spots left. So go ahead and select that if you want it. eatmoreliftheavy.com, link in the show notes. All right, here is the fastest way to find out if protein is the thing holding back your body composition. Tonight at dinner, I want you to look at your plate visually and estimate how many grams of protein are on it. Okay. Then I want you to think about your breakfast and lunch. Are any of these meals below 30 grams per meal? Are any of them below 30 grams per meal? Not because that's a magic threshold, although there is some evidence related to muscle protein synthesis, but because that's a practical limit where you need about that much each meal to get the protein for the day for most people's goals. Now, most people who are tracking protein are not even hitting their daily total, let alone people who aren't tracking protein. And usually it's because you're loading it into 1 or 2 big meals, usually dinner and maybe lunch, and then falling short at the others. You'll see 10 grams of breakfast, if that, maybe 20 at lunch, and then you try to make up for it at dinner with the 60 grams. And it just doesn't work well from a consistency standpoint, from a hitting your protein standpoint, but then there's other factors like it affects your hunger, and you often miss your protein by doing it this way, especially if you miss a meal or you don't get quite enough in the earlier meals. So simple audit. I want you to check your last 3 meals and just find the one that is consistently the lowest. It's usually breakfast. That's your gap meal that you start with. I want you to fix that one meal, find the swaps to get it over 30 grams. I think you'll see a huge difference in recovery, in satiety, in body composition when you do that. And again, for most of you, that's going to be breakfast. That's it. Simple protein audit. Just to remind you, let's start with the weakest meal and jack that protein up, then go to the next one, jack it up, and pretty soon you'll be rolling. All right, until next time, keep using your wits, lifting those weights, and remember the best transformation isn't the fastest one. It's the one that teaches you how to never need a transformation again. I'm Philip Pape, and I'll talk to you next time here on the Wits and Weights podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider before making any health changes. Some links mentioned may be affiliate links, which means I may earn a commission at no extra cost to you if you choose to purchase.